I was broke as shit, flatlined financially, emotionally, existentially. Whether by poor choices in my youth, or plain old shit luck, life spat me out straight from high school and onto the streets. Drugs followed, rehab, then relapse. I drifted from couches to shelters, to squatting in abandoned homes. Steady income? Never heard of it. So when I saw the email, I almost deleted it without reading. I figured it was just another rejection for one of my poorly written job applications, until the header caught my attention. Dinner with me for 50 grand. I'm not exactly attractive. Even before addiction wrecked the few good features I had, I didn't have much going on for me. My eyes had sunk into my skull like they wanted to disappear. My skin had forgotten what hydration felt like. So this email? Ridiculous. I had no looks, no resume, no justification for being chosen. But I'd just left a shelter, and 50 grand was a dream bigger than anything I'd ever held. So I wrote on. It was from a domain I'd never seen before. The message read, "Dear recipient, I trust this message finds you well. I invite you to join me for dinner at Redacted. This is not a romantic offer. You will be compensated handsomely for your time, provided you adhere to the following terms. Remain for the full meal until I pay the bill and escort you out. Do not pay for anything yourself. Wear formal attire. If you don't own a suit, one will be provided at the entrance. It will fit. Any breach will void all compensation. To accept, reply. A time and date will be sent. To decline, disregard this message." Did it seem insane? Absolutely. But desperation makes fools of all of us. The kind of fool that doesn't ask for explanation, just a fork and a seat. So I replied, "Hello, Shepard. Thank you for your generous offer. I accept your terms and will be there. May I ask a few questions about this proposition? Again, thank you." I didn't expect a response. Maybe a phishing scam, maybe nothing. But seconds later, a reply came. "Monday at 6 p.m. at Redacted. Questions may be asked at dinner. Thank you for your cooperation." More cryptic bullshit. That's when I gained the smallest amount of common sense and decided to look into whoever this guy was. This was clearly his business email, so I googled the domain. S&K computation firm. I was expecting some big group of lawyers off the name alone, but nope. No law firm. Just a single office tucked in a strip mall. No products, no services. Just a photo of the branch manager. Despite the fact that the office barely looked big enough for 2 people, and the title implied multiple locations, yet I couldn't even find a second one. What did they do? Solutions? No specifics, just that one word. I thought about backing out. Probably should have, but when you've got nothing left, hesitance starts looking like a luxury. I had nothing to lose, so I took the chance. Between drug-fueled stupors and getting my ass kicked out once or twice, Monday crept up on me like bruises. Slow, unseen, then sudden. I didn't have anything formal, so I threw on the only white button-up shirt I owned and some gray slacks. Both had stains I couldn't explain, and no iron had graced their surface in years. Still, they were the fanciest clothes I had. None of it mattered. The second I hobbled into the restaurant, the greeter, if you could even call him that, handed me a dry-cleaned suit without a word and pointed to the bathrooms. I took the hint. This suit seemed expensive. Real Men's Warehouse type shit. It fit perfectly, just like the email said. Too perfectly, actually. The cuffs landed exactly at my wrist bone. The collar rested like it knew my next shape already. I didn't have the time or money to question it. I walked back out. The place had a strange charm. Soft lighting spilled across tablecloths and smooth pools of warmth. Ornate picture frames lined the walls, filled with abstract paintings that felt a little bit too familiar. Wood trim hugged every surface. Big glittery curtains hung heavy, like a wedding reception. It smelled like artificial plants and faded fabric. Soft jazz floated through the air and brushed against my ears. As I scanned the room, I realized something unsettling. When I first walked in, there were at least 4 tables of people laughing and enjoying themselves. It had been noisy and lively, but now, silent, empty. Like a bell had rung that only I hadn't heard. Just a few bartenders, the mute greeter, and one bald man in a suit, eerily similar to mine. I already knew who he was. His photo was the only thing of note I'd found when looking up the domain. The branch manager. I approached his table, and before I could even ask if he was expecting me, he gestured to the chair across from him. He was an older man, maybe 50, with sad, droopy eyes. His nose was so thin and pointy it looked like a shark's fin. He seemed to have no nostrils at all. His jowls fluttered slightly as he spoke, in a soft, low tone. "Thank you for coming, young man. It's good to finally see you," he said, extending an arm for a handshake. I tried my best to sound steady and firm, despite my rising anxiety. "Thank you, sir." The conversation that followed was surprisingly pleasant. The food was better than almost anything I'd ever had, decadent and strangely nostalgic, as if it had been made just for me. He asked about my childhood, my current working conditions, and my family life. Most of these memories weren't pleasant, but it felt good to have someone simply listen. I reached a point where I started letting my guard down. He never interrupted, never judged, just watched. Then he got serious. He grabbed my wrists just as I lifted my fork. His grip was ice cold, but steady, and his tone dropped. "What is something you wish you had never done?" "What?" I was shocked by his sudden seriousness. He didn't respond, just stared, still and waiting. I swallowed. "I stole from my mom when she was dying. I was supposed to take care of her and protect her. But I spent her money on the stuff she told me to quit." A waitress appeared silently, depositing a small porcelain bowl before me. Inside sat a single seared scallop, resting on a streak of bright red pepper callus, its color staining the white plate like the shame I carried. The scallop's tender flesh gave way to a flash of heat, a reminder that some wounds never fully heal. A whisper of lemon zest lifted the flavors. He nodded, no judgment in his eyes, only something quietly accepting, then stood and excused himself to the restroom. As he left, I took a breath and tried to shake off the moment. Then I noticed it. The chandelier above us had one more bulb, just one. The light it cast bent slightly at the edges, stretching the shadows under our plates. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, back to normal. Mostly. The jazz had slowed by a fraction. Notes now lingered for a second longer than they should. He returned, looking subtly altered. His right side appeared younger and tighter. The left side remained unchanged. A crease near his mouth had vanished, and his smile felt less weighted. He asked again gently, "What's the kindest thing you've ever done?" I told him about a homeless kid I had let sleep in my car on a freezing night. I didn't know his name and didn't want anything from him. I just locked the doors and stayed up till morning in case someone tried anything. While his gaze lingered, another course arrived. A hollowed apple, cradled in a warm butternut squash soup, its sweetness tempered by the sage oil. The apple's crisp rim framed the velvety broth, echoing the way I had sheltered that boy from the cold. Each spoonful felt like a soft promise of safety in a world so devoid of it. This time as he listened, something in his face responded. His left eye seemed brighter. The left side softened. He looked younger somehow. Maybe the light was playing tricks. Or maybe the room had grown darker. He asked another question. "What's the worst lie you've ever told?" I hesitated. I had promised myself I would never recall this memory. Yet I felt compelled to tell the old man. When someone close to me overdosed, I could have saved them. I saw them, but was frozen in fear, thinking I could be just like them. When the police came, I told them he was already dead when I got there. He nodded again, still no judgment, just listening. I'm not sure how, but as I spoke, a new course appeared. A translucent, steamed dumpling sat alone, its skin almost too delicate to touch. The moment I pierced it, a smoky, chilly broth gushed out, scorching my tongue with the sting of my lies. The gentle wrapper dissolved into nothing, leaving only the burn of a secret I thought I'd buried permanently. Then he stood up and walked away, slower this time. His chair creaked slightly as he rose, and the floor beneath it curved outward in a way that made no physical sense. As I waited, I saw the wallpaper behind the bar begin to bubble faintly, like heat was pressing against it from inside. The curtains seemed heavier. The picture frames on the wall had begun to tilt, each at a different angle. Not much, but enough to notice. Enough to make you wonder. The waitstaff didn't change plates. The glasses refilled themselves, and I started noticing something impossible. Everyone in the room had his face. Not exactly, but similar. Like a family of clones, degraded with each repetition. The bartender blinked with one bulging eye. The hostess's smile sagged like melting wax. When he came back, the distortion had grown wider. His jaw was uneven, one side shriveled, the other taut as a barbed wire. The contrast on his face was more than physical now. It radiated something deeper, like halves of a personality that couldn't agree. He sat, his eyes scanning me, as if measuring the weight behind my silence. I wasn't sure if he was evaluating my soul, or just admiring the way panic settled into the corners of my posture. His voice arrived softly, almost reverent. "What memory do you miss the most?" It took me a moment, not because I didn't know, but because I was afraid to admit how fragile the truth had become. "I used to swim in Lake Michigan every summer," I said slowly. "With friends, we'd throw ourselves off docks and scream about sea monsters and cold sandwiches. It was stupid, but I felt safe, like I didn't owe anything to anyone." Shepard's good eye glistened. A tear formed and trailed down the brighter side of his face. It lingered at his chin and disappeared into the folds. The darker side remained unflinching, its socket almost hollow now. I stared at him, unsure whether to thank him or run. He didn't speak. He just stood, His movements slower this time, calculated, weighty. The chair creaked like it hated being left alone. This bathroom break felt longer. The silence thickened. The music was barely audible. The overhead lights dimmed again. And this time, they pulsed faintly. One of the picture frames fell sideways. The bartender wiped the same spot over and over, faced of white of emotion, eye bulging slightly. The wallpaper near the entrance was peeling, tiny tendrils reaching outward like roots. A fly circled the wine glass beside my plate, but never landed, looping endlessly. I felt my chest tighten. Shepard returned. This time, he didn't sit. He loomed. His face was wrong. The symmetry had given up. One eye bulged fully, twitching in quick spasms. The other was practically sunken. His mouth hung slightly open, but no breath escaped. He said nothing for several seconds, just watched me. Then finally, "Would you like dessert?" I stood, almost instinctively. "I think I need the bathroom," I said. He nodded slowly. "Take your time." The restroom was too quiet, the mirror too clear. I leaned forward, expecting to see my own ruin reflected, but instead, behind me in the mirror, Shepard waited. Not in the room, but in the reflection. His body was stretched, taller than before, suit shimmering like the surface of a pond. He smiled, both eyes twitching violently. I didn't scream or move. I just stepped back out, numb. The dining room was nearly gone. The walls had peeled upward toward the ceiling. Tables melted into spiraled masses of dark wood and cloth. The floor rippled like liquid stone. The curtains had vanished entirely, leaving a strange static haze where windows had once been. Shepard stood at the center, calm. "You've done well, young man," he said. "Repentance is never easy. The hardest part is accepting you are no longer part of the world you knew." My knees threatened to give out. I wanted to argue, to scream, to run, but nothing in my body responded the way it used to. Everything had slowed, except him. What do you mean?" I managed to ask. He smiled gently, like a father comforting a child who would just ask the final, fated question. "This meal," he said, "is not payment. It's passage." "No," I whispered. "I walked here. I remember the shelter, the email." "You remember the drug," he said, cutting gently across my denial. "In the stall, in the dinner. You remember how cold the tile was. You remember how long it took for someone to find you." I shook my head as if it might rattle the truth loose, but it didn't help. My legs wouldn't move. "All we offer," he continued, "is a moment. One last conversation. One last taste. One last confession." The last of the room flaked away like ash in the wind. The table in front of us dissolved into nothing. Steam hissed upward from cracks in the floor that hadn't been there seconds before. Shepard extended his hand again. The suit he wore shimmered strangely, colors shifting like moonlight on ocean. Patterns swirled across the threads, faces, maybe, or shadows. I couldn't be sure. "You did well," he said quietly. "You were honest. That's all we ask." I felt tears on my cheek, though I didn't know how they got there. "What happens now?" Shepard looked over his shoulder. Behind him, the restaurant was finally gone. In its place, a hallway of shifting doors, some open, some pulsing with warm light, others dimmed and sealed. "Now," he said, "you choose." If anyone back home ever reads this, just know we did all we could. This planet is, well, it's something else. For posterity, I should probably recount everything that's unfolded over the last couple of days. I think at least. I'm honestly not even sure anymore, thanks to the day-night cycle here. Hell, it's not even a cycle. Day is practically non-existent. We just get dim light reflected off the twin moons up above. It's like an ever-present state of dusk. We were flying by the pillars of creation, an exploration mission hoping to find habitable worlds somewhere out there beyond our own. It's beautiful out here, but we haven't had much luck with the habitable worlds part. Mostly just a lot of stars everywhere. The occasional small moon that was a rock of dust and ice. Nothing we could live on, though. Nevertheless, the 5 of us soldiered on. Myself, Vitaly, Parsons, Jacob, and Mildred, floating through space in search of a new world. Looking back, it feels like this planet was waiting for us, like an ambush almost. It was nowhere on the radars, not on any kind of existing star charts. But suddenly, as we were flying at insane speeds through space, it just appeared. It makes no damn sense, but suddenly, there's an asteroid belt surrounding us. This massive planet off to our port side, and debris hitting the hull of the ship. We lost it, started spinning out, with next to no control. I woke up to find the others still passed out in the bridge. All of us hastily strapped into our seats. Somehow, by the grace of whatever God was looking out for us, we were all alive. Honestly, at this point, I'm convinced we all died on impact, and we're really in some form of hell, but it seems like an even more ridiculous thought than what we've seen. It took a couple of hours to get out and sift through the wreckage of our ship, though there wasn't a whole lot we were able to salvage. Our pressurized suits weren't damaged, and the oxygen recyclers on them were in good shape. That would at least last us a week. Food supplies were more abundant, so we packed up whatever we could. While Parsons and Jacob loaded up supplies, the rest of us went out to get bearings on where we were. Darkness was about all we got, visibility limited in almost every direction. The ship was split in two right down the middle. Cargo hold and crew quarters separated out from the bridge, engine, and cockpit. With some work, we figured out that we could still get power through the main systems, using one of the cargo rooms as an airlock, so we could still use the living quarters. Not the worst outcome, all things considered. Getting into the living quarters meant that we were able to access some of our research gear, though, and that's the only reason we've lasted this long. I found a set of night vision binoculars for surveying land, and climbed up to the top of the ship for a view. Giant rock formations were off directly ahead of the ship. Huge, curved, jagged rocks jutting off into the sky in rows. They looked like a giant rib cage sticking up out of the stand. The corpse of something that lived here long ago. That's just speculation on my part, though. And a lot of fear for what may be waiting for us. The strangest thing, though, there's a forest. About 50 clicks to the starboard side of the ship. Straight off into the distance are a ton of trees. From the looks of it, reminds me of the huge trees in Jurassic Park. And I half expected to see a dino knocking them down as it went along its way. Dinosaurs would probably be too good of a discovery for us at this point. We put a pin in the forest for now, choosing instead to work on getting our bearings where we were. Hours had passed at this point, so we all piled into the crew quarters and sealed it up, hoping to get some kind of rest and fill our bellies. Despite the bleakness of our situation, we were hopeful. A distress signal was on its way back to Earth. We had food so we wouldn't starve, and the oxygen cycler was still working, so we had a little bit of light in the darkness. No impending doom. We were all asleep in our bunks when the first sounds began. I thought it was wind at first, just a really strong storm of gusts running across the barren tundra we were situated on. I could hear dust skittering across the hull outside, trying to find a way in through any unsealed cracks in the metal. Parsons woke up around the same time, looking over at me with the same questions I had, though it's not like either of us had any kind of answers. All we could do was try and tune it out and get some actual sleep, but it was fitful. I couldn't help but feel like something was out there trying to get inside, cracking the ship open like a damned shellfish to try and get at the meat hiding within. It kept going for hours. Even looking out the window, I couldn't tell what the hell was going on. Just that permanent state of dusk outside. Sand and loose rocks occasionally flying by the glass. The remains of the ship started to creak and moan under the pressure of the wind, sounding like they would fall apart at any moment. Finally, though, just when I thought I was going to lose my damn mind, it stopped. I was finally able to get some real sleep. Too bad it was interrupted. Vitaly woke us all up, screaming about something incomprehensible. By the time we were able to get her to calm down, she was babbling about how something needed to be let out, that it was waiting for us. It took nearly an hour to get her to chill the hell out. Not that we could get any clear answers from her after that. She just went quiet, nearly catatonic. The rest of us eventually had to get on with what we were doing and try to make ship repairs. Parsons and I put on our habitat suits, exiting the makeshift airlock and setting up a few lights around the wreckage to see what we were doing. The big problem came when we realized the internal seal was cracked, right between the cockpit area and where it should snap onto near the cargo hold. Without that, the vacuum of space would just rip us right out of the can as soon as we got up there. I didn't have long to ruminate on what that meant though. Parsons was tapping me on the shoulder, barely giving a whisper as he tried to get my attention. I sat down my welding torch, looking back to find our lights had attracted something to us. It was dark beyond the small circle of light we had set up, but something was out there moving, stalking us from the dense black beyond. For a brief moment, I swear I saw eyes flaming in the darkness, sizing us up for a meal. I hesitated for a moment, weighing the options, and considering that I may just be going crazy from crashing on a desolate planet. But the other side of me thought about the real implications. There's life here. Not only life, but something intelligent. The realization hit me like a brick. Next, though, the revelation that we're not at the top of the food chain out here. We might be near the bottom. The two of us hauled ass back to the airlock, desperately banging on the door for those inside to open up. I could hear it behind us, waiting just on the edge of the light. I think that's the only thing that kept it from diving right at us, ripping our throats out with whatever gnarled teeth were hidden in the dark. It probably wasn't used to this amount of light. It felt like we were banging on the airlock forever before Mildred finally opened the door. Just in time too, because the thing out there decided to chance it, making a huge leap forward just as we fell through the door. If that's the extent of it, we would have been lucky. Parsons was too slow though. As he went through, the thing clamped down on his leg, dragging him backward. He held onto the doorway, begging me for help as I collapsed to the floor, desperately trying to gather any nerve I could to offer him a hand. I finally got it, diving forward, grabbing his arm, and trying to haul him back, bring him into the safety of the ship wreckage. Whatever had him, it didn't let up. Instead, I heard a crunch as it bit down harder on Parsons' leg, jerking him backwards more forcefully. I tried, I really did, but it was too much. My grasp on his arm slipped for just the second that the thing needed, and he was gone, screaming into the night. The door closed as Mildred pressed the button inside, depressurizing the airlock and opening it from his end. I swear I could hear bones crunching from outside as it chowed down on Parsons. His scream didn't last for long, so I'm hoping he didn't have to feel the worst of it. Vitaly started saying a lot of weird shit when I got back in. Said that thing was sent to punish us, motivate us to get moving. Kept going on about how we had a duty to something greater than ourselves being here. I honestly don't know if she started legitimately going insane or had some kind of brain trauma from the crash. It's eerie though, to say the least. Her last warning was only a couple of hours ago, and it doesn't bode well. She's saying that its enemies are gonna try and kill us. So what do we do, I ask, looking at Mildred and Jacob, trying to come up with some sort of answer. I've been hearing noises from outside since her last warning. It's like whistles and hisses. Something conversing with others in the darkness in a language that's primordial to human tongues. I don't know what they're saying to each other, but I know it's not good for us at all. Mildred shrugged at me. Jacob looked almost dead in the dim light of the crew quarters, just staring straight ahead. I had some kind of hope we were gonna go home, but he sighed. I don't know, man. I think we're fucked in here. Can't just give up like that, though, Mildred offered back. We have to go, Vitaly spoke again. That's what it told me we had to do. It told you? I'm sorry, who the fuck is it? Jacob was almost yelling at her in anger. She shrunk back, staring hard at him in defiance. God, she whispered. She's lost her damn mind, Mildred muttered. I stopped listening to them when I felt like it. A deep rumbling that was barely shaking the wreckage we were in at first, but it started gathering steam. They quit bickering for a moment, pausing to notice as it began to rattle portions of the crew quarters, making the entire structure shake like the planet itself was quaking beneath us. It kept out, rhythmic, growing more intense with every beat until all of a sudden, nothing. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until it was knocked out of me with the force of being hit by a truck. 1 second I'm looking at the others, next second we're all upside down, tumbling through empty space as the ship spins around us. Landing hurt like hell, getting thrown against a metal cabinet face first, and being briefly knocked out. But once everything stopped spinning, we had a whole new problem to deal with. The window nearby broke in the chaos, a gaping hole in the place of the formerly thick glass. I held my breath again, desperately trying to get up, making my way toward the hab suit kept near the airlocks. I made it 2 steps before something tore the roof off the remains of the ship, exposing all of us to the darkness outside. I could see what did it in the faint glow of our emergency lights. It was huge, towering above the wrecked remains of our ship. Pale, waxy skin looked like it was ready to slough off the bone at any moment. Bulbous red eyes and clusters on the top of its head looking down at us. There was burning in its eyes, like a small flame was kindled somewhere in the back of its skull, showing through hundreds of bright red windows to the outside. Looking at it felt like touching madness, and to hold on to my sanity, I looked away. A scream wrenching itself from my gut and through the air. Off instinct, I took a deep breath in, and my lungs stopped shrieking in agony for a moment. I don't know why I didn't put it together until now, but there was a forest off in the distance. It's not entirely impossible. There might be oxygen here. My fear of whatever the hell was going on was briefly eclipsed by the elation that we had in fact discovered a habitable planet. Then my fear came roaring back in as this thing reached down a pale, bony hand, 7 long fingers unfurled, spikes inside the knuckles glistening as it grasped at Mildred on the ground, grabbing him up and lifting him high. I sat in stunned silence, watching as it hoisted Mildred above its head, curling in the long fingers and squeezing. I heard his bones crack as the creature tightened its grip, suffocating him and crushing any internal organs that may have been still standing. The interior spikes did their jobs, puncturing him and cutting his screams off like a balloon losing air, as blood began to pour down, drenching the creature as it opened a long, vertical mouthful of teeth to drink the life force down. "Run," I shouted at Vitaly and Jacob, taking our chance as the thing was already busy devouring our former crewmate. We took off, leaving the dim lights of the wreckage behind, and taking off, nothing in hand, towards the forested area. We ran, not stopping for a moment to look back and see if we were being followed, just assuming that if we did hesitate, it would grab us and squeeze it just like it did to Mildred. After some time, we eventually slowed, beginning to run out of steam despite the hospitable conditions of this planet. Maybe it was the fact I'd been running on stored oxygen for so long, but I think the atmosphere here might be more dense with it than our own. I feel more energized, like everything was clearer. Then again, maybe it's the adrenaline from seeing that fucking nightmare back there. For hours on hours we walked. Vitaly didn't speak of her dreams anymore. And Jacob and I just, well, there wasn't much to say with everything going on. So we just walked and kept on walking. My feet were bleeding in my boots by the time we hit the forest, but we weren't going to risk stopping and having another one of these things come after us. Instead, we just stumbled alone, keeping our aches and pains quiet out of some misguided belief we could still survive all this. Not gonna lie, despite the fear that was driving me forward, I really wanted to stop and get a good look at what these trees were. No way they could be native species from Earth, of course, but were they similar in any way? The branches I brushed past almost felt like they had pine needles on them, but they were softer to the touch and thicker than the average pine needle. I didn't stop to really get any idea of them though, instead opting to keep moving and pressing forward through the darkness of the forest. "Any idea where we're supposed to go?" I asked, speaking to nobody in particular. "The city will be through here," Vitaly mentioned. Jacob stopped in his tracks then. "Okay, you need to start telling us what the hell you know. Now, for fuck's sake," he shouted at her. "Dude, chill out for a second. Don't take this out on her," I said. "No, she's been saying cryptic shit since we first got here, and I'm tired of it. It's like a bad fucking horror movie, man. Where's she pulling this from?" He was starting to shout now. "I don't know, it talks to me," she shouted back. "What? What the hell is talking to you out here?" he was screaming. "I don't know," she screams back. A rustling in the trees cuts their conversation short, We all go quiet, waiting to hear what the hell this place has in store for us next, but are only met with silence. We need to keep moving, I mutter. The others agree, though they're not happy about it. We can get a move on, proceeding on the same path through the forest, trying not to walk in circles as best we can. So what the hell are we supposed to do when we get to the city, Jacob asks, shouting a dirty look at Vitaly through his thick darkness. I wish I knew, but I think it wants us to free it, but I don't know what the hell it needs to be freed from. She shrugged back. I didn't choose this, man. I fell asleep after we got here, and suddenly this thing is just, I don't know, in my dreams. It feels like my mind is being totally overloaded. Jacob doesn't say anything as he trails behind both of us, me in the lead, Vitaly in the middle. Sorry, he eventually mutters. It's all good. We're all stressed. We just want to get out of here, I said. I'm trying to keep some sense of morale going. Breaks in the trees gave way to a beautiful sight above us. The sky was full of stars. All from another galaxy, invisible to the naked eye back on Earth. The pillars of creation were huge in the sky. Glorious blues, pinks, greens. So many colors coalescing into something bigger than themselves. We all ended up stopping for a moment just to gaze in wonder at our own insignificance. At least if we don't make it out, I got a once-in-a-lifetime experience, I guess. The silent awe was broken by rustling trees, something coming to the edge of the clearing we were in just to watch us. Through the darkness, I strained my eyes, hoping to see whatever the hell was stalking us. I knelt down, trying to find a stick, a rock, anything that could help defend us against what may be waiting to pounce at any moment. I was running blind though, feeling over the ground with only the slightest hope that I would find something that could work. A rock came into my grasp. With a little digging to get it out from the dirt below, I was able to heft it beside me. Whatever was watching us must have sensed my intuition though. A guttural hiss coming through the trees made me think of Jurassic Park hearing it. The guttural sounds of a raptor or something stalking prey in the darkness. God, I wish it had been a fucking dinosaur. The thing walked into the clearing then, squaring up to the challenge. Through the dim light, I was finally able to get a look at it. Tall. That was the first thing I clocked. This thing was standing on 3 feet. No, 2. There was a long tail resting on the ground behind it, giving the appearance of something greater. It was at least 9 feet though, towering over all of us as it stared at us down. The same pale, waxy skin as that bigger one that destroyed the ship wreckage, with red eyes dotting the skull all over, giving it sight in what I assume was nearly 360 degrees of visibility. 2 long, spindly arms were raised in front of it, long fingers covered in jagged spikes that were made for tearing flesh straight from the bone. The mouth, it was more like a beak, jagged and sharp, but with no teeth behind it. Instead, it opened up to make another noise, and I could see a barbed tongue inside, unfurling like a damn whip, ready to crack at us. Another guttural hiss, and it did just that. The tongue actually making a crack sound as it lashed out, hitting Jacob on the neck. It only took seconds for blood to start pouring from where it struck, painting the ground crimson in the darkness. He fell to the ground, clutching at the wound, desperate to make the bleeding stop, but to no avail. Jacob was a lost cause. I clocked that immediately. I feel guilty for leaving him behind, but it was survival. I had to keep moving. As he clutched his throat on his knees in the dirt of the clearing, I pushed Vitaly forward, moving her along the path as we were on to reach the other side of the forest. It's the only way I knew to get the hell out of there. The only way to just live a little bit longer. God, I want to live. I don't want to die here on this fucking planet of terrors. His scream came out garbled as the thing jumped on him, grabbing him with those long spiked fingers and tearing at his skin with its beak. His screams didn't end as we pushed through the foliage, desperately hoping to find an end to the trees and whatever this city was that we were looking for. Finally, we made it far enough that we couldn't hear the gurgling of his cries anymore, or the hissing of that thing as it drank his blood. The last thing I saw through the trees was it wrapping that long, whip-like tongue around him, using it to constrict his body as it lapped up his blood straight from the source. Run. Just keep running. Dear God, keep running. It was still back there, waiting to devour us the moment we slowed down. God forbid there be more than one of them back there, just biding their time until we stopped moving, so it could have a nice meal of its own. There's a faint light coming from ahead, through the tree line, a bright blue glow like nothing I'd ever seen, almost neon in the intensity. It was beckoning us toward it, out of the forest, into what I could only pray was some kind of safety. As we broke the tree line, it became visible in full glory. There was a cliff in front of us, a river flowing over the side and continuing down below, leading to a huge, glowing blue cluster of spires only a few miles away. It was beautiful, like a rock quarry of nothing but the most brilliant diamonds and sapphires, giving us a beacon in the dark world. There it is, Vitaly whispered. That's the city? I asked back, looking over the edge of the cliff with unease. There wasn't going to be any easy way down. It was maybe 40 meters from our position to the water below, and no guarantee it wasn't just filled with rocks under a thin layer of water. The river was rushing by us, thundering down the cliffside with enough force to flatten anything that got caught in it. Vitaly only gave me a nod in response, seeing the same predicament as we weighed our options. The cliffside was too sheer to climb down, no good footholds or anything. There was only one thing we could do. Our choice was practically made for us by the rustling in the tree line further back. The creature had found us again, the low whistles and growls coming from its throat signaling that it was back on the hunt. Something was making it stick to the tree line though, not expose itself outright like back in the clearing. Though the slight glow I could see from those dozens of red eyes, small like rubies, staring from the wall of a dark mine, giving me a look that screamed of hunger. We gotta risk it, I said, pulling Vitaly closer to the cliff edge. Carefully made her way along the water line, careful not to slip on any loose rocks, and take a chance of being pulled in by the current. Jesus, I don't even know if this is water. Hopefully it's not some kind of acid that's gonna burn our skin off. The loud hiss of the creature brought me out of my worries about what we were jumping into. Acid bath was a pretty good alternative to what I'd seen this thing and others like it do to my friends since we crashed on this godforsaken planet. Try to hit the water at a right angle. Keep your legs straight, but do not lock your knees. Got it? Don't tense up. Ever been in a car crash? I asked her, leading us to the edge, right where the water began to fall over. Fender bender back in high school, she muttered, staring down in total fear. The trees behind us started to crack over the roaring of the waterfall. This is gonna hurt more. Deep breath, I said, grabbing her and pushing both of us off into the air, as far over the edge as we could possibly go. Our bodies cleared the waterfall, frothy waters below speeding towards us as we approached. I straightened my body out, unable to force my head over to look at Vitaly and see if she was doing the same. I just had to trust her. Okay, don't tense up. Hit the water, then float back to the surface. It felt like hitting a brick wall after being thrown through the windshield of a car. Even hitting feet first didn't stop the pain of the water taking over the rest of my body. It threw me around, twisting in the current as it took hold of me, dragging me further down the river. I tried keeping a hand on Vitaly, but I could barely tell where I even was, much less where she could be as the roaring waters ripped her from my grasp. It took a moment to get myself right, but I eventually struggled to the surface, not fighting against the current, but moving with it, trying to make my way towards a more shallow area. Vitaly, thankfully, had the same idea. We both got up on the left bank of the river around the same time, sputtering and coughing to try and catch our breath, but alive nonetheless. The last thing was up above on the cliffside, still giving those whistle growls, but this time filled with anger and rage. It definitely wasn't happy about missing out on 2 more meals. I think it may have gotten a taste for human after devouring Jacob. And the one bit of good events that I'm going to hang on to and cherish with the most fleeting joy I can find, the river was actually drinkable water. I didn't do this experiment intentionally, instead just going off the amounts I accidentally swallowed while trying to get to the river bank. But I was going to take whatever small victory I could get. We were both dehydrated by this point, and water when you're dehydrated tastes like the finest fucking wine I'd ever had, even if from an alien river that almost killed me. Only downside to having water after all this time is it reminded me how empty my belly was. I heard a low growl and started to tense up, thinking there was some other alien thing out there, before I realized it was just my stomach telling me how pissed it was at me for not feeding it. Not much I could do to quell it either, considering there wasn't any kind of vegetation in sight, just the glowing city ahead of us in the middle of a barren desert. The trees up above were the only thing I'd seen resembling any kind of earth flora, and even then, it was debatable if they were anything like ours. Besides, that's not even counting what could be poisonous for us to eat. Then we'd be in a whole other conundrum. Nothing to do but soldier on, I guess. Vitaly and I gathered ourselves, looking up at the cliffside as the creature finally gave up and turned back into the forest from which it came. Ahead of us, the city was glowing with brilliant blue, beckoning us toward whatever new horror may be waiting for us. So how do we find this thing once we get there? I asked, hoping for some kind of answer instead of just vague crypticism. It's under the city, she muttered, eyes focused on the glowing beacons ahead of us. As we got closer, I could see that the city wasn't just jutting rocks, but something much more intricate. There were actual buildings carved into these things. Windows looked over us from up high. Though whether they were occupied or not, I honestly can't tell. As we approached smaller structures of rocks, and whatever crystal was causing the glow began to dot the landscape, leading closer to the huge cluster that made up the city. The glow was almost blinding up close, but we could finally see that it wasn't just one sheer stone. There was more than windows and doors. There was nothing living in this place, but at one time it must have been something bustling. There was a civilization here. Streets and paths were actually carved in between the huge rocks and glowing buildings, with remains of things like stalls, carts, proof that, well, saying people might be the wrong word, but there was an intelligent society here at one time, living and bustling along with daily life, just like back on Earth. "Oh my God," Vitaly whispered. "We're not alone." "Well, I thought we might still be alone," I sighed, taking in the surroundings. Despite the signs of civilization, everything looked like it was in rough shape and had been for quite a while. What the hell could have done this? Some of the stalls still had small trinkets in them. Others were filled with bones of something, probably some form of butcher shop that people brought meat from. And it all just looked like it was abandoned. It all looked like it was just abandoned one day. Everyone just left. "Come on, we have to find a way underground now." Vitaly beckoned me further, moving towards the center of the city with renewed vigor. "What are we supposed to be looking for?" I asked, checking our surroundings. I've got to say, it wasn't relieving having light all around me again. The glowing buildings gave everything this odd blue tint, making it all seem like we were buried deep under the ocean. Almost like it got hard to breathe the deeper we got, especially as the buildings started to crowd in more, roads narrowing to small alleyways, as Vitaly led the way towards some unknown passage. After a bit, she finally stopped, the road ahead dipping suddenly towards a massive grate that had half the bars broken. Darkness was all I could see inside, with even the bright glow unable to force its way past the depths of black awaiting us. I looked around, wondering if there was anything I could break off to bring as a light source. The buildings in some areas were starting to crumble, and on the flood around them, there were small chunks that had broken off over time, still retaining their bright glow. Good a flashlight as any, I braced myself before picking it up, afraid it might burn from the intensity of the light. To my surprise, though, it was cool, smooth, maintaining the same glow with no heat radiating from it. My awe overwhelmed my anxiety for a moment, turning it over in my hands, getting a feel. It wasn't necessarily a stone, but some sort of crystal, almost giving me the same feeling as picking up sea glass on the beaches as a kid. Vitaly and I shared a look, both nodding before making our way down through the grate. The glow of the stone pierced through the dark, showing smooth stone walls that were almost as black as obsidian. We walked, footsteps echoing in the darkness, making it seem like there were hundreds of us marching downward to our death. The floor was on a constant slope downward, so much that I had to keep myself from moving faster because of the steep incline it eventually became. We just kept going down, though, the path occasionally winding around and around, turning this and that, making me feel more disoriented than I had been back on the sunless surface, trying to make my way through the city. At some point, the narrow pathway widened out, leading us into a chamber where the walls were significantly lighter. As we approached one side, I noticed something carved into the walls, though it was in a language I couldn't understand. Some portions of it were intercut by drawings, though. I followed along, trying to get an idea of what the hell this place was. But the more I saw, the less things made sense. The first drawing showed an image of a giant. It was human-ish, I guess. Tall, arms and legs that were similar to ours, but well, more numerous. The arms were all stretching out from it in every direction, waving like tentacles, but ending in human-like hands with long, jagged fingers. The face was human, but instead of just one at the front of the head, it had a mass of faces, all forming into each other. Eyes, noses, more eyes. It went around the entire head. Each mouth between had a set of eyes filled with teeth and twisted in a mad snarl. Above its head floated a great ball of flame, shining light down on all. Around the giant figure were winged humanoid figures, all looking as if they were guarding it. The next picture showed the people on the ground being swallowed up by the deep crevices that opened. Huge, almost demonic figures climbing out of the cracks as more people fell in. I couldn't tell for sure, but it looked like the ones falling into the crevices were transforming. Some in a halfway state as they were falling down deeper, becoming more demonic as they went. "You think this is what happened here?" I asked, looking at Vitaly as she gazed on in horror at the mural before us. This one was bigger, carved in intimate detail, depicting the giant god from the original. Many faces all twisted in righteous anger, striking at a mass of serpentine creatures rising from the depths. There were smaller people, like him flying on leathery wings around him, fighting against the demons crawling out that looked a lot like the things that had attacked us. But now that I saw the detail, on the ground were hundreds of smaller humans, all being slaughtered by the demonic creatures as they struck back at the ones above. In the background, the massive sun overhead was burning bright, flares bursting off of it like it was about to supernova and leave everything in darkness. "It is," Vitaly whispered. "I saw some parts of this in the dream." There was no mural depicting the end of the battle, ending on the incredible detail of the serpentine creatures emerging fully, extending tendrils up to the heavens as the gods struck at it. Whoever or whatever won the battle, I have no idea. The losers were very clear though, and there were a lot of them. Finally, at the end of that mural, there was a small door of stone, a relief in the ground. A relief in the middle glowed with a deep blue, beckoning Vitaly as she held a hand over it, hesitating for a moment before touching. As she did, the glow pulsed, glowing outward and moving up the door, opening it from the middle as two halves retracted, showing us the world beyond. As it opened, I could see beyond, a brilliant light coming through. It was warm, like sunlight hitting my skin on a beautiful spring day. It felt like bliss, and as we made our way in, I could see the great star at the center of this world, radiating warmth. It led us out into an even greater chamber, hollowed out with just a small outcropping for us to stand on, a mechanism over to our right for unknown purposes. Before us, though, in the chasm, was a small dying star. It flared out on occasion, sending bands of radiation and flame through the chamber, but never quite reaching as high as we were. As I looked forward, I could see the roof was smooth, carvings on the stone making complicated glyphs and letters in a language I couldn't understand. "Is this it?" I asked, looking over to Vitaly. She was already heading towards the mechanism though, pulling on one of the huge levers and setting something in motion. As the gear began to turn, the entire cavern started to rumble, making me crouch down and hold on to the floor below me as I tried retreating back towards the door. "What the hell are you doing?" "Setting it free," she said, pulling another lever, and that made things rumble even faster. I could see the sun below flaring up even more as the cave above us began to open towards the pale dusk outside, illuminating the world beyond. The sun began to rise up, moving through the darkness as it waited for the gap to grow larger. For the first time in who knows how long, the sun was about to rise on this planet. As the door above opened up, a tendril of darkness suddenly shot through, piercing into the sun. The massive ball of light began to sputter, and I could vaguely see the image of a great being trapped inside of it, also skewered by the darkness coming through the crack above. The many faces were all painted in massive terror at what was happening, but it was too late. More and more tendrils of darkness shot through the widening gap, stabbing through the light and ensuring it would go out forever. Before Vitaly knew what was happening, she was screaming, looking onward as the previously flaring lights of the sun began to dissipate, the body inside crumbling to ash as the last of the fire went out. As it did, the darkness seeped in, oozing over every crevice as the sounds of the demons came from above. "Thank you," I heard a voice whisper in perfect English, but not audibly. No, it was speaking from somewhere far back in my mind, running over empty mental fences as it invaded my thoughts. "What the hell?" I whispered, backing towards the doorway as I held the glowing stone up to see. The darkness was everywhere, permeating the depths of the chamber. Now that the sun was absent, though, I swear I could keep seeing brief glimpses of something, like stars in the cosmos. But then, as the darkness swirled it was swallowed up once more. The dark was breathing, pulsing through as it encroached further on us. I saw Vitaly fall to her knees, over by the contraption, looking up at the ground. "It tricked me," she whispered. I didn't have time to respond, as the glowing stone in my hand began to fade out, all light leaving it now. I assumed the glowing city that was far above us was in the same situation, because no light was permeating through the dark of the world above now. Instead, I could just hear hundreds of those things doing their whistle hisses, signaling to each other that they had won a great victory. How I could tell, I don't know, but I could feel the darkness staring at me intently. It was studying me, waiting for me to make another move. The things above were just waiting for us to come out to where they could reach, likely hearing from their friends how delicious we were after the darkness snuffed out the last bit of light. Too bad for them, there weren't enough to go around. "Oh, I won't let them have you," I heard the voice say again. "Who the fuck are you?" I shouted, far louder than intended. It got a reaction from the things up above, who started whistling with even more vigor as they heard that I was alive. A rock formed in my throat as life began to flash before my eyes. "Nothing you could comprehend," the voice came again. Tears began to form in my eyes, hot, stinging, and definitely against my will. Before I realized it, I was sobbing, hoping against some fucking hope I'd be able to make it out of here alive. I could hear Vitaly doing the same thing a few feet away. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," she was heaving in forced words, between huge gasps for air. The panic was setting in now, with nowhere else to go but flood out. Do not be sorry for the weak. It came again. Before I knew it, the darkness was moving in on us, obscuring every bit of light around. I felt myself swallowed, suddenly, cold, as if there were buckets of ice dumped over me. My limbs became weightless, tossed around as I was pulled off the ground. Further down into the darkness, I could see the edge of a small cliff in the chamber getting closer through the gloom. I couldn't do anything to stray away from it, though, powerless to resist the pull of the dark. Instead, I fell right into the chasm as it went ever deeper. It was even worse than the river, almost tearing me apart. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until it was ripped from my throat in a scream as my limbs were stretched to either side of me, desperately trying to find anything to hold on to, all in vain. Eventually, I stopped struggling back, letting the darkness overtake me as I kept falling deeper and deeper into whatever hell was beyond here. I could only imagine what might be waiting on the other side, whether it was the flames of biblical hell, or just a mass of those damned creatures that killed the rest of the crew. I don't even know where Vitaly is at this point. Off somewhere on her own, probably wrapped her in her own blanket of darkness. I choked. I suddenly felt like I was drowning, the darkness forcing its way into my lungs and flooding them so I couldn't breathe. Sputtering, I started to flail, arms moving against the heavy force all around me. It felt like trying to run underwater, unable to get an actual hold on anything, and desperately trying to fight my way free. Suddenly, before I know it, the silence all around me in the darkness is replaced by the crashing of waves. I get thrown so hard into the ground, surf pounding my body as it washes over me, wave after wave. I try to force myself to get up, but fall as another wave hits me. My eyes are closed, but I can suddenly hear shouting all around me. Snippets of words saying to call an ambulance, asking where I came from. I can't make out the rest. What I know is I can feel sunlight on my skin again, the gentle glow breaking through the cold of the water. I opened my eyes against the stinging salt water, desperate to see if I was truly in hell, only to see others, humans, gathering around me, hauling my body from the surf. As I look over, I catch a glimpse of Vitaly, water spewing from her mouth as she coughs it from her lungs. She looked at me with terror in her eyes, in just the same state of confusion. We know just where we were. We know what we saw. So how the hell did we get here? The last thing I heard before the darkness overtook me, knocking me unconscious from the ordeal we've gone through, is the blare of sirens coming our way, like a loud whistle breaking through the hiss of ocean waves. As ridiculous as this may sound, this post might be one of my last chances. I'm sure one of you will comment that this website never actually existed in the first place, before I refresh the page to find an error code and a link to purchase the domain name. But Reddit being willed out of existence is the least of my worries right now. This is Graydon's fault. I hadn't heard from Graydon in 3 months, when he showed up at my apartment just last night. He looked terrible. His usually neat brown hair was greasy and unkempt, hanging in stringy clumps around his face. Dark circles rimmed his eyes, and his clothes looked like he'd been sleeping in them for weeks. But what really bothered me was the way he kept glancing over his shoulder, like he expected someone to be following him. Do you remember me? He said, before I could even invite him inside. I was confused. Of course I do, Graydon. Where have you been? I've been texting you for months. Your mom said, please. He grabbed my arm, and I could feel his hand shaking. I can't explain it here. You just have to trust me. There's something I have to show you. We've been friends since high school, and I'd never seen him like this. Graydon was the type of guy who planned everything 3 weeks in advance and color-coded his class schedules. Seeing him this frantic and desperate was genuinely unsettling. Okay, I said, grabbing my jacket as quickly as possible. Emma was already asleep, and I didn't want to wake her. I slipped my engagement ring off my finger and set it on the nightstand. No point risking losing it wherever we were going. Where are we headed? Whitmore Caverns, about an hour north of here. I knew the place, a series of limestone caves. They used to offer guided tours until they shut down in the 90s after a couple of accidents. The entrance was still accessible if you knew where to look, but most people stayed away. It wasn't exactly the kind of place you'd expect to visit at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. The drive was uncomfortable. Graydon barely spoke, just stared out of the window and occasionally muttered something under his breath that I couldn't quite make out. When I tried to ask him what was going on, he'd just shake his head and say, "Not yet. You'll understand when we get there." We parked at the old visitor center, now just a crumbling concrete building covered in graffiti. Graydon pulled 2 flashlights from his backpack and handed me one. "Follow me," he said, "and don't say a word until we get deep enough." Deep enough for what? Just don't talk, please. It's important. The entrance to the caves was hidden behind a cluster of overgrown bushes, about 50 yards from the parking lot. Graydon moved through them like he'd done this before, leading me down a narrow stone pathway that disappeared into complete darkness. The cave was bigger than I'd expected. The main passage was wide enough for both of us to walk side by side, with rough limestone walls that sparkled in our flashlight beams. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, creating an echo that made it impossible to tell how deep the cave system went. We walked in silence for what felt like 20 minutes, descending steadily into the earth. The temperature dropped with each step. I could see my breath forming small clouds in the beam of my flashlight. Graydon seemed to know exactly where he was going, never hesitating at the various branching passages we encountered. Finally, he stopped in front of a section of wall that looked identical to every other section we'd passed. But when I got closer, I could see a small hole about the size of a baseball, carved into the limestone at eye level. "Okay," Graydon said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you see the flame?" I aimed my flashlight at the hole. There's just empty darkness, maybe 6 inches deep before the beam hit solid rock. "Graydon, there's no hole." "Stop." He grabbed my wrist. "Don't tell me what is and what isn't. Just yes or no. Do you see a flame?" His grip was tight enough to hurt, and there was something in his eyes that made me take a step back. This wasn't the Graydon I knew. This was someone on the edge of a complete breakdown. "No," I said carefully. "I don't see a flame." His face contorted with frustration. "Look again. Really look. Are you absolutely sure you don't see anything burning in there?" I looked again, even though I knew it wouldn't change anything. The hole was empty. No flame, no light, nothing but limestone and shadow. "I'm sure, Graydon." That's when he grabbed my hand and shoved it into the hole. The pain was immediate and excruciating. It felt like I'd grabbed a red-hot coal, a searing heat that shot through my palm and up my arm. I screamed and jerked my hand back, stumbling backward until I hit the opposite wall. When I looked down at my palm, there was a perfect circular burn in the center, already starting to blister. The skin was angry red, and it felt like it was still on fire. What the hell, Graydon? What did you... I looked back at the hole and froze. There was a flame burning inside it. A small, steady flame, maybe 2 inches tall, flickering gently like a candle in a draft. It cast dancing shadows on the walls around us, and I could feel the heat radiating from the opening. "Do you see it now?" Graydon asked, his voice filled with desperate hope. "Yeah, I see it." That's when he lost it completely. "Yes," he screamed, his voice echoing through the cave system. "I'm not alone anymore. I'm not crazy. Someone else can see it." He started shifting between hysterically laughing and crying within seconds of each other, spinning around in circles like a child. 3 weeks. For 3 weeks I've been living in this hell alone. But you see it now. You see the flame. I'm not alone. I was so focused on his manic celebration that I didn't notice him backing toward the cluster of rock behind him. He tripped over their jagged edges, and I watched in horror as he fell backward, his head striking the pointed tip of a limestone formation with a wet, sickening crack. The sound echoed through the cave like a gunshot. Graydon's body convulsed once, and then it went completely still. Blood pooled beneath his head, black in the flickering light of the flame that I could now see burning steadily in the wall. It took me nearly 2 hours to drag his body out of the cave system. He was heavier than I'd expected, and I had to stop every few minutes to rest and figure out which passage led to the surface. The combination of sweat and tears in my eyes only made it harder to proceed. By the time I reached the parking lot, my clothes were soaked in Graydon's blood, and my burned hand was throbbing with every heartbeat. I called 911 as soon as I had cell service. The paramedics arrived first, followed by 2 sheriff's deputies who took one look at the scene and immediately started asking questions. I told them everything. About Graydon showing up at my apartment, about the cave, about the accident. I watched them load his body into the ambulance on a stretcher, covered with a white sheet. At the police station, they kept asking me the same questions over and over. Why had we gone into the cave? What were we doing down there? How exactly had the accident happened? I answered everything honestly, even though I could see the skepticism in their eyes when I mentioned the flame. They kept looking at each other with expressions I couldn't quite read. Confusion, maybe, or suspicion. After 3 hours of questioning, the chief of police came into the interview room with a folder in his hand. "Look," he said, sitting down across from me. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing here, but we need to get this sorted out." "I'm not playing any game," I said. "I told you exactly what happened." He opened the folder and spread several photographs across the table. Crime scene photos of the cave, showing the exact spot where Graydon had fallen. But in every picture, there was no body, no blood, no evidence that anyone had died there. "We found you 3 hours ago," he said, wandering around the parking lot, covered in blood, and talking about your dead friend. "But here's the thing. We searched every inch of those caves. There's no body. There's no evidence that anyone else was ever down there with you." My heart started racing. "That's impossible. You put him in the ambulance. I watched you do it." "Son, there was no ambulance. There was no body. And there's no record of anyone named Graydon living in this county." I stared at the photographs, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. In the pictures, the limestone formation that had killed Graydon was clean and undamaged. No blood, no sign of impact. I don't understand, I whispered. He was my friend. We went to high school together. The chief leaned back in his chair. Look, it's not illegal to report a false death, technically. But I don't understand what you're trying to accomplish here. Are you looking for money? Are you having some kind of mental crisis? We're gonna let you go with a warning. But if you come back here with any more stories about dead friends who don't exist, we're gonna have a different conversation. They released me an hour later, and I took a taxi home in a daze. Everything felt wrong, like I was living in someone else's life. I kept looking at the burn on my palm, the one piece of evidence I had that any of this had really happened. When I got home, Emma was waiting up for me, curled on the couch in her pajamas. Vince, thank God you're okay. What happened? You look terrible. I sat down next to her and tried to explain everything. Graydon showing up, the cave, the accident, the police not believing me. She listened patiently, occasionally reaching over to touch my arm or smooth my hair. That sounds absolutely terrifying, she said when I finished. I'm so sorry you went through that, but you're home now, and you're safe. She stood up and kissed my forehead. I need to be up early tomorrow, so I need to go to bed. You should get some rest too. Before I knew it, I was waking up on the couch from a full night of sleep. It was unlike me to fall asleep so suddenly, but after last night, I wasn't too surprised. Sunlight was streaming through the windows, and I could hear birds chirping outside. Emma was already gone for work, but she'd left a note on the kitchen counter. I picked it up and read the front. I love you, sleepyhead. I smiled despite everything that had happened, and slipped the note into my pocket before heading out the door. I felt the need to maintain a sense of normalcy in all of this nightmare. I tried calling Graydon's phone on my way out twice, but was met with a dial tone each time. My first stop was the corner store for my usual morning coffee. I've been buying the same large coffee there every day for 2 years. Always 99 cents. Always from the same machine near the register. There was a handwritten sign that said coffee. Always 99 cents. In faded black marker. I put a $1 bill on the counter. This should cover it. He just stared at the dollar, like I'd try to pay with Monopoly money. Dude, you know that's not enough. Our Arabic coffee is $2.50. Good one, Mike, I said with a chuckle. This coffee's always been 99 cents. I'm here all the time. The cashier finally looked up at me, with irritation. Yeah, I know, Vince. You come in here almost every day. He shook his head. Our coffee's always been $2.50, and always will be. Are you feeling alright, man? I looked back at the coffee stand and read the sign again. Arabic coffee, $2.50 a cup. I shook off an intense shiver down my spine. I pulled the remaining $1.50 from my wallet, but as I reached toward the cashier, he pointed at my hand. Hey, alright, you finally left her. Good for you. You're a free man now. Confused, I glanced down at my hand. I'd forgotten to put my ring back on. I laughed awkwardly. Oh no, I just took my ring off last night because, well, I just took it off. It felt like too much to explain at the moment, and I was already running late for work. Sure thing, buddy. He gave me an exaggerated wink as he handed me the receipt before I headed back to my car. At work, I tried to focus on my usual tasks, but kept thinking about the strange interaction at the corner market. Around 10 a.m., My coworker Dave stopped at my cubicle. "Morning, Vince. You look tired," he said, glancing at my face. Suddenly, an overwhelming wave of exhaustion hit me like a physical force. My eyelids felt heavy, and I had to grip my desk to keep from swaying. "At least that tea will wake you up," Dave continued, nodding at the cup in my hand. "It's actually coffee," I said, lifting the cup to take a sip. But when the liquid hit my tongue, it was without a doubt tea. Earl Grey, hot and strong, with just a hint of bergamot. I instinctively spit it out. I stared at the cup in confusion. I'd just bought coffee. I poured it myself. Even took a sip on the way here. But I was definitely drinking tea. Dave had already walked away, leaving me staring at my cup and questioning my own senses. The exhaustion was getting worse, and it was making it hard to concentrate on anything. I put my head down on my desk, just for a moment. "Oh man, tired already?" Another coworker, Joan, was walking past with a stack of files. "It's only 10 a.m. You can do this." The moment she said, "You can do this," the exhaustion vanished completely. I sat up straight, feeling more alert and energized than I had all morning. It was like someone just injected caffeine directly into my bloodstream. I spent the rest of the day trying to focus on work, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental was wrong. The coffee becoming tea, the sudden exhaustion, and equally sudden energy. It all felt connected somehow to what had happened in the cave. I sent Emma a text around lunch. "Something funny happened to me with the clerk at the corner store today that will make you laugh. I'll tell you about it when I get home." She didn't respond. I tried again at the end of my shift. "Heading home now. Want me to pick you up anything?" Still no response. As I was packing up to leave, my boss, Mr. Harrison, appeared at my cubicle. He looked annoyed, which wasn't unusual, but there was something particularly hostile in his expression. "Vince, we need to talk about your performance lately," he said, loud enough for half the office to hear. "Your work has been sloppy. You're making careless mistakes, and frankly, your attitude has been unprofessional." "Sorry, sir. I know I've been distracted, but I don't want to hear excuses." He cut me off. "You're supposed to be a professional, but lately you've been acting like an amateur. At this rate, you're worthless to this company." The word worthless hit me like a physical blow. I felt something shift inside me, a cold emptiness that seemed to spread through my chest. My phone buzzed with notification from my banking app, then another and another. I pulled out my phone and saw multiple overdraft alerts. My checking account was showing a negative balance of $847. My savings account, which had over $3,000 in it yesterday, was showing zero. Even my emergency fund was completely empty. "Sir, I started to say, but Mr. Harrison had already walked away. I sat at my desk for several minutes, staring at my phone and trying to understand how all my money could have just disappeared. There were no transactions listed, no withdrawals or transfers. The money was simply gone, as if it had never existed in the first place. When I got home, I knew something was wrong before I even opened the door. The apartment felt different, quieter, emptier somehow. Inside, most of our furniture was gone. The dining room table Emma and I had picked out together, the bookshelf full of our combined collection, the framed photos of us from various trips and occasions, all of it had vanished. What remained was a single couch facing a large TV, a gaming console, and a stack of old pizza boxes and empty beer cans scattered across the floor. "Emma?" I called out, but there was no response. The words of the cashier echoed through my head. "You finally broke up with her?" I tried calling her, but my hands were shaking as I dialed the numbers. She picked up on the third ring, but her voice sounded different, annoyed. "Hello? Emma, thank God. Where are you? What happened to our apartment? All our stuff is gone. What are you doing?" Her voice was cold. The words hit me like a physical blow. "Emma, it's me. It's Vince." There was a long pause. I could hear children playing in the background, and a man's voice saying something I couldn't make out. "Look, Vince, I know it's you," she said finally, "but this isn't funny. If this is some kind of prank..." "Emma, what are you talking about? We're engaged. We live together. We had a dinner together 2 nights ago, and you made that pasta dish with the sun-dried tomatoes." "Jesus Christ, you broke up with me 3 years ago, Vince," she said, her voice raising slightly. "I don't know how you got my new number, but you're acting insane. I should have known it was you texting me earlier today." "Emma, please, I know this sounds crazy, but something is happening to me. You left me a note this morning. You wrote, 'I love you, sleepyhead.' I have it right here in my pocket." "I'm hanging up now. Don't call me back, or I'll call the police." "But Emma..." "Fuck off, creep," she said, and the line went dead. I collapsed to the floor, the phone falling from my hand. This wasn't possible. Emma and I had been together for 2 years. We'd gotten engaged 6 months ago. I had photos of us, text messages, emails, proof that we'd built a life together. But when I looked around the apartment, there was no sign that a woman had ever lived here. No photos of us together, no second toothbrush in the bathroom, no clothes in the closet except my own. I pulled out the note she'd left that morning, desperate for some proof that I wasn't losing my mind. The front still read, "I love you, sleepyhead," in her familiar handwriting. But as I watched, the ink began to fade. The letters grew lighter and lighter until they disappeared completely, leaving only blank paper. I flipped the note over, and there was more writing on the back, words I hadn't noticed before. "You're the only one for me." The moment I finished reading those words, I heard the sound of crashing cars from outside, multiple impacts, one after another, followed by the screech of metal and a hiss of steam from radiators. But there were no screams, no shouts for help, just the mechanical sounds of accidents without any human voices. I rushed outside my front door and looked down toward the main street. Every car I could see had crashed. Some into each other, some into parked vehicles. Others veered off the road entirely. But all of them were empty. Their engines still running, headlights cutting into the growing darkness. The sidewalks were completely deserted. No pedestrians, no one running to help, no emergency responders. It was like every person in the city had simply vanished. I ran further down the road, calling for anyone, but my voice echoed off empty buildings. Every storefront was dark. Every window was empty. The only sounds were the distant hum of abandoned engines and the occasional car horn from vehicles whose drivers were no longer there to turn them off. There was one horn that stood out, though. It wasn't steady. It was hitting in bursts, as if someone were pounding on the steering wheel. I walked several blocks until I found a car that had flipped over on the side of the highway. There was someone in the passenger seat. My heart stopped as I realized who it was. Emma was strapped inside the overturned vehicle, a large shard of glass from the windshield piercing her throat. Her foot was pressed against the steering wheel, causing the horn to sound with each spasm of her body. Blood was pooling beneath her, and her eyes were wide with terror and confusion. The horn kept blaring. She just kept kicking and kicking. When she saw me approaching, her mouth moved like she was trying to speak, but only gargling sounds came out. Blood bubbled from the wound in her neck, and her eyes, those beautiful green eyes I'd fallen in love with so many years ago, stared at me with a mixture of recognition and horror. She knew who I was in her final moments. I think she remembered. I reached through the broken window trying to help her, but there was nothing I could do. The glass had severed something vital, and I could only watch as the life faded from her eyes. Her foot finally stopped pressing against the horn, and the sudden silence was deafening. I'm writing this now, sitting in my empty apartment, surrounded by evidence of a life that apparently never existed. Everyone is gone. Not just Emma, but everyone. The entire world has become empty, except for me. And I think I know why. You're the only one for me. I'm posting this in the desperate hope that someone, somewhere, is still out there. Maybe there's another person who touched the flame, who understands what's happening. If you're reading this, please comment. Please let me know I'm not alone. Because if I am truly the only one left, I don't know how much longer I can handle this silence. The flame is still burning in that cave. I feel it calling to me, promising answers, promising an end to this isolation. Maybe it's time to go back. Maybe it's time to join Graydon and let someone else carry this burden. Please, if you're reading this, just tell me you're real. Tell me I'm not the only one left.